Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to The Simple Quilter. I'm really excited about today's video because I finished the quilt top for my husband and I've really been anxious to get this quilt done. I absolutely love it. I've told you before that I really am liking the half square triangles and I love the way this quilt turned out, and the best part is he loves it too. I'm going to step aside and show you this quilt, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I assembled it. Okay, so let's get started. Now, I have squared this panel up. I had actually two of these panels, so I've already used up the first one, and I did have to square this up, and I will have to tell you that it was very difficult for me to square up. I had to work and work and work and work at getting this panel squared up, but I did finally get it squared up. So you may have some, but just be patient with it and use the technique that I showed you in my video on how to square up a panel, and I'll include a link up above for that. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to show you how I put this quilt together. Okay, the first thing I did is I cut this panel. I needed this panel to be 36.5 by 44.5 because my half square triangles are 4.5 inch unfinished. So that means that they are 4-inch finished size. So whatever the dimensions were going across and down, each of them had to be divisible by 4, and then you add 1/2 inch for seam allowances. So this ended up being 36 by 44 when I added the borders, 36.5 by 44.5 when I added the borders. And that did take a little bit of finagling around with the math. I'm not really going to show you how I did that because your measurements could be entirely different. But you just kind of have to play around with those until you can get a number that is divisible equal by the size of your finished half square triangles. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so what I did is I just cut my borders. Sewed them on. And pressed them to the borders. Now I did add the side borders first. Alright, and I cut them to the size so that I don't get a wave. In fact, I have another video. I think I can include another link above to show you how to add the borders. When I had those added, then I added the top and the bottom borders. Sewed those on and pressed them out towards the border. Now if you have a light border, you can press them towards the dark, whichever way you feel most comfortable, but you do need to get a good press on those. Okay, so this finished size is 36.5 by 44.5. So then it's ready for my half square triangles. Now I used the half square triangle paper that I talked to you about before. I have another video that you can see how I made those half square triangles. And this paper is an older paper. You can use the New Thangles or the papers put out by Fat Quarter Shop. But anyway, those are available. And I would strongly encourage you to use the half square triangle paper. It just made my piecing so much easier and so much more accurate. So I used that. Okay, so I have my half square triangles. And for my quilt, I like big quilts, so I put 4 rows on either side. And what I did is I just started laying them out in the order that I wanted. And I did 4 rows going down. I had to have 4 go across and 11 down because it's 44.5. These are 4-inch finished, and 4 goes into 44 11 times. So there were 11 rows going down. So then I just started laying them out just like that. Now you can play around with whatever design you want to use. This is the design that I selected. So when I moved over to this side, they continued just like this. They didn't turn in this way. They turned out. They turned outward just like that. So you can play with the design and see what you want. Now I will give you a little tip. I couldn't have mine coming in this way, and I could have divided it in the middle and had all those coming this way and all these coming this way, but I had an odd amount going across. I have 9 going across, so if I'd had an even amount, I could have done half that way and half that this way, but since I had an uneven amount, I couldn't do that. So I just decided on this way. But I have to tell you, I love the look of it. So I'm okay with all of that. And the most important thing is my husband likes it too, and it's his quilt. So anyway. Okay, so after I got all of them laid out, and I tried to make sure I didn't have 2 here or 2 here. I couldn't always do that, but I tried my best not to have them side to side like this. So I tried to have different colors. I think I had a total of 8 different colors, 2 browns, 2 different greens, a yellow, a red, an orange, a blue. So, you know, if you have fewer colors, then you are going to have to be a little bit more careful with repeats there. So after I got all of them laid out, I don't have enough to show you how to lay them all out, but you can use your imagination. What I did is I started sewing. I stacked them up like this, and then like this. I took them to my table and just started sewing them together so that I didn't have any goof ups on how I laid them out. Now here's another tip. Once I had them in the position that I wanted, I did take a picture of it because it's easy to drop a stack or to drop a few, or they might fall off your design wall. So you do want to take a picture, and I did have to refer back to my picture several times. Okay? So then once I had those by 2s, then I just put them back up on my design wall. Just like that. Okay, so I have 2 sewn, 2 sewn, 2 sewn, and 2 sewn. And I haven't pressed any seams yet. You don't want to press your seams yet. You just want to get them all sewn together. So then I would just take these, sew them, and then I would put them back up on my design wall. Okay? So then I had a row of 4. And all of my rows of 4 were sewn together before I ever pressed one seam. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to be sure that the seams on each row were opposite. So this row, say they went that way, this one went this way, that one went that way. You need opposing seams so that they nest together well when you go to put them together. And I did use my little numbered pins. I saw this neat tip, and you might do this if you have some just flathead pins. You can just take a marker and mark the numbers on there. You don't have to buy these fancy pins. I saw that and I thought that was really neat. But I do use these pins. I have a couple of sets of them, and I do use these regularly because I don't want things to get mixed up and messed up. So then what I would do is I just labeled these. This is row 1. And that's row 2. Now, another thing you could do if you don't have the flathead pins, you could just use Post-it notes or just pieces of paper and just put them on there with pins. You don't have to have anything fancy. You don't have to go buy anything. But since I have these pins, I did use these pins. Now, here's another tip I wanted to show you. And this really helped me because I did end up taking these in my camper, and I had my picture in case I got things messed up, and I had a specific technique that I used, a routine that I used, so I didn't mess anything up. But I used these pins to help me keep the pressing straight. So I would just put these opposing numbers, these opposing little flags on there. Let's see, can you see that up close? They just have a little arrow on them. Okay, so that's an important tip that I had for when you're working with lots of half square triangles. Now I am going to show you a little pressing tip that I used, and I think that might help you also. Okay, so here is my unit. Now none of these seams have been pressed. So I'm going to show you what I did. Now on the sides I had rows of 4, but when I did the top and bottom I had rows of 17. But I'm just going to demonstrate with this one. So what I did first is I just set the seam. You can use your clapper if you want. I do think something magical happens under there, but I don't always use it because it is a little bit time consuming. And I just press these seams. I just set the seams. You can use steam if you'd like, but I just was sure to set those seams. Okay, so those seams are set. Now my arrow, this is, let's see, this is the second row, and this is this little arrow shows that all the seams need to be pressed to the left. So what I did is I turned my strip this way, and I just pressed my seams from here. And I did try to use my clapper here because I do want the seams pressed as flat as they can. Now I did struggle, well that's cool, I'm going to tell you, I did struggle with, do I press them open, do I press them to one side? And I did a little bit of both, and I have to say that I really ended up just going to one side. I know there's a lot of controversy over that, you know, like does it weaken the seams? Some say it does, some say it does not weaken the seams. I don't really know for sure because I've not done a scientific experiment to prove it is one way or another, but since my quilts are used a lot and are washed a lot, I decided that I was just going to go with pressing the seams to one side and being sure that I nest my seams. So again, I want those as flat as I can possibly get them. And really the clapper should be left on a little bit longer than that. You can use steam if you'd like. I try not to move the iron back and forth or this way. I've talked to you about that before, just an up and down motion. And then you can put that clapper on there if you'd like. And as you can see, those seams are just pressed as flat and as nice as can be. So then the next row, my little flags or my little pins are going to be flagging me to press to the right on that top one in the bottom row. And then when I get ready to sew them together, they'll just nest together perfectly. And I was really amazed at how accurate my fourth of a seam, my fourth an inch seams were. Everything really turned out pretty good. If some points got cut off, there weren't very many. Okay, so I just wanted to show you those tips. Okay, so this is what it looked like once I had both sides sewn on. And as you can see, it turned out really, really well. I really, really like the outcome of this quilt. I just really, really like it. So that's what it looks like once you have the sides sewn on. So I did both sides and sewed those on. Okay, and this is my long, now this is the long panel that goes across the top, and I have one that goes across the bottom. I don't think I'll be able to show you both right now. I'll show you the finished product once I get that all done, but then you're just going to sew the top on. And so this is what it looks like. It's just one long piece. I just pieced them all together, 4 rows of 17 each, and they're just I haven't sewed those on yet, but I'm going to sew on the top and the bottom. And there you have it. There's that quilt. It's just great. Now I'm going to get those sewn together, and then I'm going to show you the final product. Okay, so I have finished sewing on the top and the bottom, and I absolutely love the outcome of this quilt. I'm so excited. My husband hasn't seen it yet. He's been out on the porch with the dogs, out in the backyard with the dogs. But I love it. Oh my gosh, I just love it. Now I do want to give you a little tip about this quilt and using the half square triangles. This is just what is working for me. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I always do a little stay stitch, an eighth of an inch away from the edge of every quilt that I make. And I do that to help kind of secure the seams. Plus, I think it helps prevent stretching when you take it to a machine, a long arm quilter. And I have done this on this quilt, and I really noticed that some of the seams were kind of coming loose a little bit at the edge, and I think that's because I used the half square triangle paper, and so there was no, I cut the thread off right there at the, when you trim the squares, when you trim them down into the triangles, when you cut them apart. So I do think it's important to do that little eighth of an inch stay stitch all the way around. And I do think it's extremely important for this quilt because it has so many seams, and because it is a little bit heavier because there's so much piecing in it. So I just wanted to give you that tip. I do hope you all have enjoyed this video. This has been one quilt that I have really enjoyed doing. I hope you all will give these half square triangles a chance in a quilt, maybe even a panel quilt if you'd like. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Please share with a friend. Subscribe if you haven't. As always, leave a comment. I have really been enjoying the comments. And until next time, have fun quilting.